Hi, welcome back and thanks for watching again. My name is Urito. For today's video, there isn't a whole lot I can talk about right now as part of this regular intro. And so let's just jump right into the pedal cam or the overhead view, and I'll talk about what we're trying to do today as we go along. And so let's just jump right into that, and I hope you enjoy today's video. Okay, and so the first thing I like to do is compare the Breadboard Overdrive in its stock form against a TS10. The Breadboard Overdrive is this thing on the left here, and regular viewers of this channel should be very familiar with this tone and the circuit. I've used it countless times in a lot of the videos that I make, but it's somewhat of a transparent, not to use a buzzword, but a transparent type soft clipping overdrive. And I have a full video series on how to build this, so if you're interested in building your own Breadboard Overdrive, please check out those videos. I'll have them linked in the description below. And on the right we have the TS10. The TS10 probably needs no introduction. It is part of the Tube Screamer family, starting with the TS808 and then moving into the TS9, and the TS10 was sort of their final iteration, although they had the sound tank come after this. The Tube Screamer, just extremely popular, probably the most popular and famous overdrive pedal slash circuit out there, but has a strong mid hump, cutting off a lot of lows and cutting off a lot of highs, but pushes through in the mids to give you that signature Tube Screamer tone. And so first, let's listen to these pedals back to back using some loops, and we'll get to hear the difference between the tones and how they compare to each other. Okay, so let's start off with that. And so for today, I want to modify the Breadboard Overdrive with as few steps as possible and see if we can get close to that Tube Screamer tone. And I'm doing this for two reasons. One is that if you have actually built your own Breadboard Overdrive, this will be something that you could do to your own Breadboard Overdrive and recreate something similar to a Tube Screamer. And also I wanted to see what creates that unique Tube Screamer tone. A lot of people love it, some people hate it. Whatever your preferences are, it is an undeniable Tube Screamer tone. And so by going through these modifications, I wanted to see if we can figure out what creates that signature tone without going too deep and doing like a full clone or copy of that circuit, and see if we can create that Tube Screamer tone by just doing some small mods to the Breadboard Overdrive. Okay, and so the next thing I want to do is compare the schematics of these two pedals. For simplicity's sake, I have omitted all the flip-flop switching circuits from the Tube Screamer and also the input and output buffers. And so what I have here is just the core center part of the Tube Screamer circuit, or the TS10 circuit. So here is the Breadboard Overdrive schematic, and then comparing that against a TS10, and then I'll switch back and forth between these two real quick. Okay, and so now I want to highlight what is different in the TS10 compared to the Breadboard Overdrive. And so the parts that are in red are what's different from the Breadboard Overdrive. The parts that are in black are the parts that they have in common. Okay, and so you could say that they're quite different, or you could say that they're quite similar, meaning that the design of the circuit itself isn't that radically different between these two. The next thing I want to do is highlight the parts that we are not going to touch for this modification. So the parts in red that you see here, so these are all components or values that are used in the TS10, but we're not going to actually implement that into today's modification to the Breadboard Overdrive. And that's because they do make a small difference maybe, but they're not really going to be that important. And so the next thing I want to point out are these two component values. And these two we are not going to change, but they will affect the tone just a little bit. And so changing these values to Tube Screamer spec is just going to get you just that little bit more closer to the actual Tube Screamer tone, but they're not really that big of a difference, so we're going to leave it alone for today's modification. So let's move on to the actual modifications that we'll be doing to the Breadboard Overdrive. We're going to do two things, and the first thing is we are going to implement this, the Tube Screamer tone circuit, into the Breadboard Overdrive. And so if you look at the Breadboard Overdrive, it uses 1/2 of the dual op amp to make a full frequency boost. And so it's just a full frequency amplifier, and so that gives it plenty of volume so that you could use the Breadboard Overdrive as sort of a clean boost or a very low gain boost into a tube amp or whatever. So it has plenty of output volume that you could really crank it and push whatever comes after it. But we are going to change that second op amp stage into the equivalent of a Tube Screamer tone circuit. And so this is what it looks like, and these are the things that we're going to add or change. Okay, and so let's listen to the Breadboard Overdrive with the added Tube Screamer tone stack and hear what it sounds like. And so the second and last thing that we're going to do to the Breadboard Overdrive is to add this low pass / high cut filter that's in the Tube Screamer. It's right here. And if you look back at the Breadboard Overdrive, we have a similar thing in the exact same place. In the Breadboard Overdrive, this was our tone knob, and so by having a resistor and a capacitor, this created a very simple low pass / high cut filter. And by changing the resistance, we're able to tweak where that high cut would happen, and so that created a tone knob. And this is a very simple circuit, but it's used in a lot of pedals, and it's a very effective tone circuit. But in the Tube Screamer, this is a set value, and if you kind of do the math, this is a very extreme high cut filter. And so let's add this high cut filter to the Breadboard Overdrive, and that's going to be really simple because we already have both components in place. We only have to swap out the trim pot for a set value resistor and also change that capacitor to a different value, and we're done. So let's do that, and we'll listen to the tones.